Papers for you. The Sunday Times has a deeply moving picture of the Queen's family standing vigil.
I hope they get a chance to...
Tomorrow.
Yes, exactly.
Let's have a look at the Sunday Papers for you. The Sunday Times has a deeply moving picture of the Queen's family standing vigil by her coffin. It says simply, farewell.
And to the Sunday Telegraph there, Together for Granny, the many grandchildren of Queen Elizabeth paying their tribute.
Sunday Mirror has Harry and William united once again in grief for their grandmother, the Queen.
And the Observer we go to predicts a stormy week for Prime Minister Liz Truss following the period of national mourning.
The Mail on Sunday has the photograph of that incredible close-up, actually, of King Charles's two sons united together once again in their Blues and Royals uniforms.
And the Sunday Express is actually campaigning for an annual day of remembrance for Queen Elizabeth, an ER day, or if you like, an Elizabeth Day. I think there's going to be a growing feeling about that.
Yes, I think so. I think it'd be a nice thing
Elizabeth
to do.
Day, I like the sound of it.
Even if it's not a bank holiday or anything.
No, maybe it's a day where you do something particular for something, I don't know. But an Elizabeth Day, I think, would be rather nice.
Got to be done. Let's go through those papers in a bit more detail then with legendary broadcaster David Hamilton and political consultant Emma Burnell. Good to see you both this morning. Let's have a look at the Sun on Sunday, David, should we? And looking at the grandchildren's vigil last night.
Yes, the Queen's 8 grandchildren side by side, William and Harry in military uniform, near the coffin at Westminster Hall. Sophie Wessex was in tears. She was very close to the Queen, of course. The Queen thought of her almost as another daughter. Someone else who I think has been absolutely brilliant through all this has been the Princess Royal, Princess Anne.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
You know,
We've got so many people emailing in, GB viewers, who are saying, don't forget Princess Anne.
Yeah. Yes.
She's underrated.
often
don't forget
referred to
her.
as the hardest working royal.
Oh, yeah.
But with such dignity, and she, you know, you can say this as well, people always say this as well about Kate. She never puts a foot wrong, and of course the Queen. If you look back at her reign, 70 years, she always got it right. And one of the great things about her, I think, was her power of forgiving. You know, the way that she forgave people who in many ways had harmed the royal family or
Like
had
Martin McGuinness.
threatened. Yes, a very good example. And shook his hand so gracefully. I mean, wasn't that absolutely brilliant? Very hard act to follow.
Oh, yes.
Yes, true.
Emma, the Mail on Sunday, is looking at the funeral tomorrow, which, I mean, we've seen some of the planning, like we do, because it's obviously been around for decades,
Of course, yeah.
I cannot picture what it's going to be like.
It's going to be extraordinary. I don't think the country will have seen anything like it possibly since Churchill's funeral. I think even the royal weddings will pale in comparison in terms of that sort of great British sense of pageantry combined with a national moment of mourning. I think even those who are less pro-monarchy are aware that this is a national moment, that particularly given that this is the moment of mourning in particular. This is the day of mourning. It's not about the succession. It is about the mourning, and I think this will be the day where everybody either says, yes, I'm going to take a moment to remember somebody who was in charge of us for 70 years, or they're going to say, I'm going to let you have that moment and stand back respectfully.
Yes, isn't it interesting, as you say, even anti-monarchists have to sit back and say and acknowledge the sheer power of what is going on at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the system, I'm not a fan. In terms of the woman herself, she seems to have been at the head of that system and been incredibly good at that. And I think the problem we have is that because succession passes immediately, it's very difficult not to have the conversation at the same time as the mourning. But I think the two need to be separated, and I think tomorrow very much will be a day just for the mourning.
No, I think you're right. I mean, we can't, whatever anyone's doing, you can't forget the fact that this woman has been a constant in our lives for 70 years, David. I mean, for the vast majority of people in this country, that's our entire lives.
Yes. I'm actually the only person here who has seen two kings.
Two.
Yes.
Oh, of course, the one
because I remember the funeral of George VI, who was a lovely man, much loved particularly for his steadfastness during the war. And that was a very, well, actually a lot of similarities between that service and the one that we're going to get tomorrow. I was looking at it at the time, how we saw it was on newsreels, Pathé newsreel. We had to go to the cinema. We had to go to the cinema to see it. Yeah.
Can I ask them, because for a lot of us, in our day-to-day life, if you like, the one thing that everyone says is, isn't it funny saying "God save the King"?
Yes.
But you see, you must have gone through that when you went changed to "God save the Queen."
I did, and what was different about that funeral was that it was in the winter, and somehow there's something more somber about, winter time, isn't there? But he was a very, very popular king, much loved, very shy man. He had a stutter, and making public speaking was very, very difficult for him. But you could see how much his daughter loved him, and the feeling of grief at the time, very much replicated now. We're going through, all these years later, I feel that the ceremony tomorrow is going to be very much the same as the one that we saw on the newsreels then.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting as well, watching how King Charles now has come out with William. They're clearly determined to meet people, and they've set it as a priority. Yesterday we saw, who knew? They suddenly decided to go and meet people in the queue. And there was a lovely moment where a lady in the queue, her phone went, and she answered it. It's gone viral, apparently. She answers her phone, and she said, "No, Daddy, I can't speak to you right now. I'm shaking Prince William's hand." Nobody knew they were going to just stop and talk to the people, and they must have been watching it on the telly, mustn't they? And they said, one must have said to the other, we really ought to go down and meet some of the people in the queue.
And I think this is what's quite interesting about the modern monarchy, is they've kind of been through that learning curve where, and if you think about in the 90s when Diana died, and they were heavily criticised for not being out there amongst the people. So they've clearly taken that on board, and their media management, their people management, their image management, and their understanding of their evolving relationship with democracy, with the people, I think is actually really interesting as an observer as much as a participant.
Well, you can't ignore it, can you? And I know the Sunday Times, David, is looking at what they're calling the pilgrimage, which is what this queue has turned into.
Yes, they're calling it the People's Pilgrimage to pay their respects to the Queen. Quite incredible. What is the latest number of hours that people are queuing?
12
Have you heard this morning?
12.
12. The thing is, too, it's got very, very cold overnight.
Yes, it has.
And after a very hot summer, it's come as an awful shock. I found it coming to the studios this morning. So if you were out there queuing for 12 hours, you would be extremely taters. There's no doubt about that. And that, for 1 minute, I think that's about how long they get to look at the coffin. But of course, there is the building and there's the whole atmosphere that they get. And David Beckham was there. He, as I think you mentioned earlier, he was queuing as well. So I wonder whether he'll get his knighthood now. Is that cynical of me to say?
No, it is. I think David Beckham did it because of the reasons he said. Because he comes from a royalist family and he wanted to do it, and he was there for his family
I still think David Beckham should get a knighthood for it.
So do I. I really do. But I don't think he did it for that reason.
No.
But people have to be so negative, don't they? There's a lot of, especially on social media. No, not David.
No, I only put it in as a little funny aside. But
No, I'm not getting at you. But there are people on social media who are being nasty about the fact that David Beckham did it. But other people have done it. There are quite a few people who actually have done the whole queue. The actress Tilda Swinton.
Oh, did Tilda
Yeah,
Swinton?
she was there, and she's done the entire long queue. So I think we don't know how many other people may be in there for whatever reason.
I think you have to remember that not everybody loves the royal family. Not everybody loves us. I know you find that hard to believe.
I don't believe that for a minute.
But not everybody does. But I think the one thing that's come out of this is that the vast majority of people in this country do, and I think that is the Queen's legacy. Her legacy is now, we've seen the enormous support for the royal family.
I mean, I think that's absolutely fair, and I speak as someone who's not a royalist, but I know that I'm in a minority on that, and you have to respect that. And if you are a Democrat, which is one of the reasons I'm not a royalist, I have to accept that I'm in a minority, and therefore let other people have their moments. And I think that's what, the job isn't for me to never ever speak out again. It's to choose the right moments and be respectful of other people and what they're feeling.
Yeah, it's a very good point, well made. Emma, David, we need to leave it there just for the time being, but we'll catch up with you both a little bit later on. Thank you.
And thank you to everybody who's already sending in their views, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Francesca says, I've lived in the UK, however, I am a Canadian citizen and now currently living back in Canada. Queen Elizabeth II is our sovereign as well. I've been a monarchist all my life. I've admired her and all that she's done over the years. In Canada, Queen Victoria also was admired and loved. And to this day, we still celebrate Queen Victoria's birthday, what we call May 24 weekend, which is a bank holiday.
Yeah. There you go, that sets a good precedent for an Elizabeth Day.
It does, doesn't it?
Across all the Queen's territories, I think, but it's not for me to dictate that, but let your parliamentarians know.